What's up, MetaNerdz? In this video, we're going to review the novel Darth Plagueis. We're going to answer 4 very important questions. Which fans would like it the most? What time period does it take place in? And we'll give a general plot overview. How good is the writing style and audiobook production? And what do I like and don't like? So first off, I think the best way to show which kind of fans would like it is just to tell you what's inside of this book. There is so much lore on so many different things that I just want to list a whole bunch of them out. In this book, you will learn the history of Munilist, how the Munes rose to power, the history of Megiddo, Plagueis' complete life story, about Bith Darths like Venomous and Tenebrous, royal Naboo history, Naboo battles with Gungans, near Gungan extinction by mercenaries, how the IBC sinks its hooks into everything across the galaxy, the Lorum's rise and fall, Palpatine's teen years, Palpatine's relationship with his family, so much midichlorian lore, how animals use the Force to survive, tons of free will issues, and philosophizing about the will of the Force itself, the light side's will and the fight with the dark side, why the Force had to birth Anakin, why the Sith's true goal is to destroy the Force itself, how Maul was found and trained, a bunch of parts that overlay with the movie, like parts that put a whole nother layer onto what we actually saw in episode 1. You get to see how incredibly focused Palpatine was, why Dooku wanted to leave the Jedi Order, why Sifo Dyas ordered a clone army and how he got the money, about Dooku's apprentice that turned to the dark side, Plagueis' original clone army candidates, what Plagueis thought of the ancient Sith Lords, how the Trade Federation got their voting power, how they got their army, how the Separatists started to form, the way that Plagueis was able to secure Kuat for the Republic, and finally, how Plagueis died. So yes, this is a pretty big book, but it's also an important book if you care about any of those topics. Now let's talk about its time period and a plot overview. It goes back to 67 BBY when Plagueis is with his master, but in some dialogue you'll get to see the mysterious ways in which Plagueis was conceived back around 147 BBY, a story that is a very interesting foil to Anakin's conception. It starts off with Plagueis under his master Darth Tenebrous, and moves through how he killed him as per the rule of 2, and follows Plagueis as he goes about planting the seeds that will grow into the chaos of the Clone Wars. His double identity as a high-ranking investor brings the story into contact with the intergalactic banking clan, other dark side practitioners on obscure worlds, and eventually into contact with Palpatine and Naboo. Plagueis decides that he and Palpatine's alliance will be unlike any Siths in history, and central to that plan is a cure for mortality with the use of midichlorians. This complicated web of motives and players gives us what I think is the best look at how the galaxy really works. Credits, political favors, individual dreams, and local planetary pressures make the discussions on banking and politics thoroughly engaging and rewarding. That might sound crazy, and don't get me wrong, there are tons of action scenes while Palpatine is turning to the dark side, and when Plagueis is acting as an assassin, but the motives of the characters feel so real, and along the way they just happen to drop a ton of lore. As a secret Sith duo, they go about trying to feel out the galaxy's sentiments towards the Jedi, the Republic, and entities like the Trade Federation. Plagueis will cross many, even incurring the wrath of the King of Naboo, while Palpatine starts to move his own pieces into place by training Maul and picking the mind of Dooku. This book comes right up to being concurrent with Episode 1, as Palpatine proves the irony of Plagueis' power over death, and goes just a bit past the movie as he lays hooks into Anakin, being a fatherly, supportive figure that is outside the complex and confusing Jedi Order. Now let's talk about the writing and audiobook production. As for writing, James Luceno is simply one of the best, if not the best, Star Wars writers. He wrote the Vader trilogy, Labyrinth of Evil, and Cloak of Deception, which are some of the best Legends novels outside of the Bane and Revan books. He even wrote 2 of the best canon novels, Tarkin and Catalyst, with Catalyst being one of my favorite new books alongside of Bloodline and Dark Disciple. He creates compelling conversation by making the motives of the characters interesting and realistic, but he is also amazing at representing the character's inner monologue. There are whole stretches where you are just inside of the head of Plagueis as he completes solo missions, and it is incredible to see the philosophy of a Sith Lord and how the mind works in one of the most important people in the history of Star Wars. But because everything is set up so well, you will also be engrossed while listening to political and financial debates. The characters are believable. The Grand Protectorate seem genuinely betrayed when the IBC backs out on them. The Hutts have a great balance of immorality, ambition, and actually deference when asking the Munes for loans. And then when Naboo is brought in, it flows with the rest of the characters' motives, and shows how the leaders and public would logically respond to this kind of change. What makes a great movie is that the script makes sense, and the actors are able to convincingly show the right emotions under the circumstances. That means having a logically flowing and interesting story. Lucino does that excellently, but how about the audiobook? Well, if you're a Star Wars audiobook connoisseur, you'll recognize the name Daniel Davies.
Go to your grave knowing that you are last of the old order, the vaunted rule of two, and that the new order begins now, and will for 1,000 years remain in my control.
Scenes where Sidious is using Sith lightning, or firefights with the stealthy Mune operative, are all aided by perfectly balanced sound effects that don't overtake the narration, but really pull you into it. We almost always listen to the audible version, both because it makes you feel like you are really in the Star Wars universe, but also because it can be listened to while doing mundane stuff around the house or driving. Studying Sith philosophy and politics is a great way to recover lost time every day. If you want a free copy of this book on Audible that you can keep forever, be sure to check out our link in the description. But now I want to talk about what I like and what I didn't like. Starting with what I like, well, it was pretty much everything. Seriously guys, you know if you've been in the live streams, this is one of my most recommended Star Wars novels. Because the Bane and Revan books are all tied at number 1 for me, Plagueis is more directly important to the characters of the Star Wars movies. My favorite era is the Clone Wars, so if that's true for you, then this book is a must-read. I also love the philosophy. There are parts where Darth Tenebris explains his vision of a future of the Sith Order, and honestly, this is pretty close to my real-world philosophy. And that's what's cool, you get to see a spectrum of philosophical interests, and everything from finance, politics, and a lot of metaphysics. Of course, the Star Wars universe is fictional, but the parallels are what make it interesting and meaningful. On the spectrum, you'll find Palpatine, who reveals himself to just be a sadist, pursuing power for power's sake and the ability to control people, while Plagueis and Tenebris both have the improvement of the galaxy as the goal. Plagueis would still crush the weak and need a strong centralized power that would be uncontestable, but Tenebris seeks to defeat the cruelty caused by the randomness of the Force and to end the Jedi Order, but by creating enough prosperity, opportunity, and personal responsibility that everyone across the galaxy would be right in imposing their will on the universe. The metaphysical stuff comes in when all of these characters think about why the Force made the galaxy the way it is, as they examine conflicting evidence of free will versus determinism, and as they try and figure out if the Force is some sort of sentient power that exerts its will on beings, or if it is just a type of energy. Besides that deeper stuff, I love how every part of this book is packed full of lore on species, worlds, and technology. Now for what I don't like, there isn't much. Without giving it away, the manner that Plagueis dies may be anticlimactic. I say that it may be, because I do agree that many real-world people of great importance die in ways that are much less epic than their legacy. But definitely upon the first reading I was disappointed. Second time though, I really did think it was more fitting for his character. It showed his arrogance and Palpatine's incredible ability to deceive, and was a realistic problem for a Mune who never took a moment to relax up until this very moment of apparent triumph. I'm just also aware that I may be rationalizing this section because I do love the book overall so much. But that being said, I think that completes our review. If you watched our other reviews and podcasts, you know that we are very honest. I just genuinely see this as at least tied for first on my list of Star Wars books. If you want to connect with us, help support this channel, or pick up physical copies of this book or your free Audible copy, be sure to check out the links in the description. Special shout out to our supporters over on Patreon. But most important of all, remember, never celebrate early, and the Force will be with you, always.